Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit that subscribe button if you're new so you don't miss any of our great football content this season. I thought Saturday was once again fascinating. So there was always this kind of feeling the SEC would always say, hey, man, the reason this is such a great conference, anybody can beat anybody. Well, UCLA beat Penn State 42-37. So I don't hear SEC fans saying, they look at the Big Ten as weakness. Well, you used to always pat yourself on the back because the 8 seed would beat the number 2 seed. And my takeaway was I've always been a James Franklin supporter. But this is one of the things that makes the Big Ten tough. In the SEC, everybody's in the same time zone. You're asking Oregon to go all the way cross country. And now you're asking Penn State to go all the way cross country. I watched Washington play Maryland. Okay, Washington was asleep in the first half. Didn't wake up until the late third quarter, and then the offense looked great. But they just got beat up by Ohio State, had to travel 3,000 miles. And then I'm watching UCLA and Penn State. Penn State didn't wake up until midway through the third. You're asking these college kids, you're traveling cross country. You don't travel nearly as well as the NFL does. You don't stay in the kind of hotels. You don't bring in 26 trainers. I mean, the NFL now travels, John, as you know. I mean, it's like staying at the Ritz-Carlton, going to a spa 6 hours a day. So I think what makes the Big Ten problematic for these coastal teams is you're going to get some of these games in the middle of the season off a huge Oregon game. Penn State cross country was just no juice. That was my take on it.
Yeah, well, I think it's twofold. One, I think Penn State had treated that Oregon game like their Super Bowl. That was going to be a season-defining game because if we beat this team, we finally get that, kind of monkey off our back. We beat a top team who's not as good as they had been in theory because they're much younger. We should win this game. It's at night. And then they lose. So the way they had built the schedule leading into that game was a joke, right? They were playing FIU, Nevada, and then they lose that game in dramatic fashion. Almost felt like they had checked out. So you show up long cross country against my guy, Tim Skipper, Fresno State guy that takes over for Deshaun Foster.
Yeah.
Who's Tim Skipper's brother is the running back coach for the Bills. His dad's a longtime NFL coach. Just going to bring them juice. Jerry Neuheisel, who's been at UCLA as a player and a coach forever. They just kind of had a fuck it mentality.
Yeah.
And they unleashed Nico as a runner. And Penn State's just coming off this game that was their Super Bowl, lost it. And let's face it, no chance they had a great week of practice. I don't believe that for a second, which I understand because when you build something up, anything
with a young kid with 22-year-olds.
Yeah, so then all of a sudden they were down. If that game was 6 quarters, Penn State would have came back and won the game, right? But they were down, and then all of a sudden their quarterback's pretty overrated, right? It wasn't his fault they lost the game. The defense was
But you know what, John? When I watched Drew Allar, there's not a lot of juice to it. He doesn't have great instincts. He's not inspiring. He doesn't have tons of energy. He's just a big, strong kid. But that was a game where you sort of needed your quarterback. Say, fellas, get on my back. We're not.
Nico was doing that. Nico was doing that, running guys over. It was just a fan of football, and I grew up actually a pretty big UCLA fan. My cousin was a walk-on there in the late '90s and early 2000s. That had to be the coolest UCLA moment in football in 10, 15 years.
Well, remember when they came
Josh
back
Rosen
and
beat A&M?
Yep. Remember they came back at halftime. Similarly, not a lot of fans in the stands, and they beat Texas A&M, and it was like 44-41. It was just wild football game. But I don't know. I like James Franklin, but I think he's a great energy guy and a great recruiter. But
I think it's over after that moment. I mean, it's one thing to lose to Oregon, which it sucks because he's lost that game a lot. But they lose in overtime. They're clearly right there. They were just in the Final Four. But you can't lose to UCLA as a 25. That is, I think USC losing to Harbaugh and Stanford was more out of left field, right? That was in the peak of the Harbaugh, the dynasty. Stanford was an embarrassment. I think they had just been 1-11. Tavita Pritchard, they were 40-point underdogs. This might even be crazier, though, because of the hype that was around this team. Even though they had just lost to Oregon, I mean, I didn't think maybe they would cover because it was 25 points. But if you said, what would you guess the score? 45-25 or something?
Yeah.
Colin, Penn State, Jim Knowles, the guy that they took from Ohio State, is the highest paid defensive coordinator in the country. That's what Penn State just paid the defensive coordinator to come. UCLA had scored 57 points to start the season. They just scored 42. They scored 57 points. Nico had become kind of a running joke. Like, he left all this money at Tennessee to come to this bad program. And you talk about inspiring, like how many runs he's just running over guys. He looked like Cam Newton meets Lamar Jackson. He was, if he had played like that over the course early on against with UCLA, they clearly would have been in more games. I mean, it was just, to me, there was the human element too. I mean, I love Tim Skipper. I've known him forever, but seeing Rick Neuheisel, who had coached at UCLA, watching his son, who had played there, and now as an assistant coach, calling plays. Jerry Neuheisel found out he was calling plays like Tuesday night. It's been very
in
chaotic.
two practices. Yeah,
it's been very chaotic in that program. The coaching staff probably includes like 7 total coaches right now. The Rose Bowl, it feels like they've sold signage all over the place because they know people won't show up. The whole thing's boarded off. Remember those old Raider games and 20 years ago that would used to be blacked out? Mount Davis was all tarped off. That's what the Rose Bowl feels like. If buyouts did not exist, I would say if you told me James Franklin was fired this morning, I would have believed you. But obviously the buyouts, the $50 million, it does feel like it's at the point in time. Like I saw someone comparing it to Calipari. Calipari eventually just kind of leaves. James Franklin is kind of like John Harbaugh. Like if this no one thinks John Harbaugh, or when people say it was a time for Mike Tomlin. These guys are bad coaches. You put James Franklin at Florida, he'd be fine. He'd win. Is he Saban or Kirby? No. But maybe it's just run its course. He's been there 12 years, and the resume speaks for itself. Last year was his opportunity, and Allar throws that ball across his body, and they lose to Notre Dame, or else they're in the national championship.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the Calipari comp is spot on. Is that John could still coach, but when you're a dominating recruiter, the expectations ramp up because that stuff's now so transparent. There's so many sites, and fans get so worked up, the expectations ramp up. Mark Fuel has told me that the great thing about Gonzaga, he goes, I can get 3-star recruits. He goes, if I went to UCLA and I recruited the exact same class I did at Gonzaga, I'd get heat. And he goes, yeah, but that's our system. It works for our system and our players, and we keep getting to, the tournament and winning games. You go to these big schools, fans pay attention to that recruiting, and they go crazy when you get it, but then you got to win all these games.
Chris Peterson's a great example, right? The team he had at Boise, if he had at UCLA or he had at Washington, they would have
get crushed.
But they would have they would have loved the team, but they would have hated the classes as the kids were coming.
That's right.
They'd be like, Kellen Moore, we don't want this guy as our quarterback. We want Arch Manning.
One more college topic. Florida beat Texas. Billy Napier, every time you think he's done, he pulls one out. They beat Texas and Arch Manning 29-21. So listen, they have 4 new offensive linemen at Texas. The pass protection's not great. But I got to tell you, I sat there and watched Arch Manning. He holds on to the ball way too long, and he doesn't have a great instinctive feel. When I watched him this weekend, there were a couple moments, John, where I thought the game was in his head. Like he double pumped on stuff, or he looked almost mechanical. He was afraid to take big shot down the field. And it's I don't want to be too harsh. I'm not sure Arch Manning, there were some when he came out that said he went to a small school, he dominated average competition. But I've not really seen, he's got he moves well, he's got the body, he's got the name, but there is something to be said about, he's still young, there's an it. Some guys you get them the ball and there's a confidence and there's an it. This Texas team, the Sark, for all the criticism, he wins a lot of games. Yeah. They're not a good football team now.
Well, I think if you go back 15, 20 years ago, a guy like Arch gets several seasons. I think in the day and age where you're paying so much money to individual players, I think his spot's in major jeopardy in 2026. You just pay too much for the roster to leave it in the chance of, seems like a good guy. Obviously, his uncles are legends. Like, this isn't Peyton or Eli's son. This is Cooper's.
Yeah.
And if you removed, he threw a beautiful, like, deep bomb for a touchdown. You remove that play. I thought he was mostly atrocious yesterday.
Yes. Yeah.
And they played Florida. They didn't just play, Georgia or Bama. So they still, A&M looks excellent. And, Elko is known now with Saban retiring right there with Kirby as like the best defensive coordinator in the country.
Yeah.
So this could get even weirder. And it's like, well, they're kind of a transition year. There are no transition years anymore at the top programs with the money. Ask Oregon. We're in a transition year. We bought it and we're moving. And we
Oregon had to replace. They had to replace 11 offensive starters. Oregon, and they're great.
So to me, I would say Arch's position's in major jeopardy in 2026 because their mentality, wouldn't you agree, with the amount of money you're paying for a roster and a coaching staff, and the transfer portal now is to compete for national championships every single year, and you don't get like a 3-year runway. Like the Drew Allar experience, that this is his third year, pretty rare. But by his second year, they were in basically the Final Four. I don't know that Arch is getting a second year. And I bet there would be some people that said, well, what if we had transitioned last year? I mean, there are people in Penn State saying we shouldn't have let the backup go to Missouri. We should have gone with that guy over Drew Allar. But these are the type questions you ask when you're at the top programs and you have access to all the sweet players, right? So if they go 8-4 and he continues to look like this, I just don't see him as a quarterback in 2026. I really don't. And that's just how this thing works. It's because you basically can cut a guy / move on from a guy, force him out. Remember a couple years ago at Ohio State when they basically blamed it all on Kyle McCord? It's different because McCord's last name is not Manning. But again, like, this pretty cutthroat now. I mean, you hear these Lane Kiffin. It's become very transactional. You either get it done or you're done. And they're like, Kyle McCord, they blamed everything on Kyle McCord for losing to Michigan. Ironically, they lost to Michigan again. Now, granted, that they won the national championship with Will Howard, but they just kind of force you out. It's not like other people would want him, I'm sure, but his arm talent. There was a throw that Lagway made, a deep bomb down the middle, and you just went, God, the physical attributes on this kid are eye-opening. And then you watch Arch. You said he was a good runner. They ran a couple like quarterback powers for him. He's okay. I mean, he's not Cam Newton or Lamar Jackson. So his athleticism, he can't just take over that way. He's like Drew Allar. He can move a little bit and he can bust off some runs, but I wouldn't call him a runner. And then watching the arm, he misses a lot of layups too. That's part of the problem. So the layups, and Sark's getting guys open.
Yeah, Sark's always gotten guys open, and he not only misses layups, but when you watch him sometimes, you're not quite sure he's got the right arm angle or the mechanics. Like, some of it looks bad. It just doesn't look right. It's again, Dante Moore can spin it. He can miss, and you're like, like Sam Darnold could throw a pick, and you still like the delivery, you like the velocity. Like, I don't know. I look at it and I'm like,
if his name was Arch Middlekauff and he was just a 5-star normal quarterback, not famous last name, is he benched right now?
Yeah.
I agree.